Turning now to Kenya, what is Vision 2030 and what opportunities does it offer international investors?
Thank you. Vision 2030 is Kenya's plan and strategy. Our goal of making the country a middle-income country by the year 2030, which we have only 20 more years to go. This is a plan that we developed in the last 3-4 years. We have traditionally planned in 5-year cycles, which is sort of corresponds with each government is in place for about 5 years, And it occurred to us that this isn't making sense, that if we are going to get out of the sort of levels of poverty that we're in, we need to project a little bit beyond just 5 years. And so it was a national strategic thinking and a national strategic planning process that we embarked on. It involved stakeholders across the board. Government, non-governmental, private sector was very, very central in the development of it, because our government has made this commitment that the private sector will be the engine of growth. We also appreciate the fact that if there's going to be a movement from the poverty stage that we are in to becoming a middle-income country, wealth will have to be created, employment will have to be created, the economy will have to grow, and therefore the private sector has a very, very key role to play. So they were very central in this visioning, as we called it. And the strategic thinking and planning process, was stretched over a period of about a year and a half. So the document that we call Vision 2030 is Kenyans visioning and imagining what a developed Kenya, a middle-income Kenya would look like. And within that particular vision, we have very clearly identified a number of pillars for getting us to becoming a middle-income country. There's a very strong economic pillar, and that economic pillar, again, the private sector, very central. They developed a good part of it in partnership with a number of foreign experts as well. And it is about how to position the economy and managing the macroeconomic issues and aspects of the economy, getting the economy to grow at least 10% and consistently over a period of time. What is it that we need to do with the economy? And so the private sector, very central and key in the economic pillar, and that's a very important one. And then we have a social pillar that looks at all the social aspects related to food production, food security, healthcare and education, and shelter, water and sanitation. Very, very important for us. Infrastructure development, all a part of it. And then there's the political pillar. And the political pillar is equally important because, again, you asked the question earlier about what are these risks that investors fear when it comes to investing in the continent. And the fact is that political instability has cost us a lot. The last 50 years of independence, the level and the extent of political instability that we've seen in the continent is to a large extent very politically motivated. So that's now being managed. In the case of Kenya, we have just recently gotten ourselves a new constitution.
Yes,
on the 4th of August. We had a referendum. The 27th, we promulgated a new constitution. And the constitution then provides for us a framework for governance. And so within that political column, political pillar, governance was a big one. So within that, we're looking at issues of corruption, for example. So again, talk about variables that are not conducive and supportive of good business and investment. Corruption has been a big one, and we can't run away from that. We have now, with this constitution, put in place certain structures and institutions that will enable a completely overhauled judiciary. For example, over the next 12 months, the judiciary in Kenya is going to be a new one because we appreciate the fact that some of the problem with regard to prosecution, for example, and due processes in the courts and the judiciary were as a result of not very accountable and not very effective judiciary. So that's being cleaned up.
So is it your expectation that now that you have the new constitution in Kenya, that it will help to increase business and financial transparency? Because this is a matter of tremendous concern to international investors, that there should be business transparency.
Absolutely. The first group of people in Kenya to react to the promulgation of the new constitution was actually the business community. And that says something. They came out and congratulated Kenyans for having achieved this very historical, this major historical achievement. And they spoke about why they felt that this was very important. And they reiterated the fact that there have been too many things in the environment that have made businesses uncomfortable and investors uncomfortable. And a big part of it has to do with this unpredictability, this the level of corruption. Now with the new constitution, there's even a chapter on leadership and integrity, what we expect of our leaders. The new structures and institutions have been created that enable the private sector. Even at this point, there is a roundtable between business leaders and the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister's office. So regular contacts between the government and the private sector so that the concerns of business are on a regular basis and continuously being communicated to the government. That wasn't the case. In many African countries, the government did what governments do, and the private sector was busy doing what they're doing, producing goods and services. That has now changed. So the linkage between the private sector and the government and the engagement between the two, what our constitution has done is that, again, in addition to the fact that the private sector also participated in it because they wanted to see in this constitution all those factors that contribute towards an enabling environment for what they need to do in order to do their businesses and do their businesses in a sustainable manner. They've made sure that there are these infrastructures and structures and institutions to allow this. For example, with our Vision 2030, there is a national committee, a national economic and social committee. And this committee is at the highest level. It has ministers in it, and it has some of the key industry and private sector leaders who also see on it. So this is the oversight body that is monitoring and ensuring that our efforts towards this Vision 2030 and becoming a middle-income country stays on track. And so a lot of business people have a certain level, their level of comfort with what the government is doing and the kind of environment that has been created has increased quite significantly. Their doors are now open, so private sector people do no longer feel like adversaries because there had been tensions before between the private sector and the government. And I'm seeing that happening in a number of African countries as well. As leadership changes, you're even having a situation where you have leaders, heads of state, heads of government, who themselves have a business background and therefore appreciate the role of the business community and will do, therefore, what is needed and necessary in order to provide that enabling environment for the business community.
You were referring earlier to the social pillar. And one of the things in that in that regard that has sort of caught the imagination of a number of people is a number of microfinance and social enterprise programs. To what degree do you see these coming up in Kenya, and have you seen any perceptible impact on poverty as a result of social entrepreneurship and microfinance?
Absolutely. Micro enterprise and microcredit programs on the continent, they're beginning to mushroom everywhere. But in Kenya, we have certainly seen the impact that has. For the longest time, as you know, a lot of businesses and financial institutions shied away from what they perceived as the poor, the unbankable, because it was perceived that there wasn't too much business to do with that group. And because that is such a large group, a large proportion of the continent, the this phenomenon that we call now microfinance and micro-enterprise is really a thing that was started very interestingly in the non-profit sector. The NGO sector is the one that quickly appreciated that the very poor people that they were working with also needed to have access to credit. And so the first microcredit institutions, if the one that's best known is the Grameen Bank model, even that started as a non-profit organization, by a non-profit organization, with the appreciation that we need to get money and credit into the hands of the poor, and that the poor, when they have access to this credit, are able to do some incredible things in order to improve their lot. And I think the commercial banks and all sorts of other microfinance institutions have come in subsequently, such that you now have a fairly significant microfinance, micro-enterprise sector that's growing so rapidly. And so we need to make sure that we, again, maintain the focus on making sure that we are looking at the poor and enabling them. It's not just about credit, because what NGOs are able to do very well, that traditional commercial banks were not able to do, is to invest also in building the capacity of the people. It's one thing to make credit available. It's another thing to make sure that this credit is going to be applied properly, that people have good business plans, good projections, and that they actually are making money. So I think the prospects are tremendous. We need to see more. I don't think we can get enough microfinance and micro-enterprise programs on the continent. I think the continent must go in that direction, because I believe it is the way that we will be able to grow the economy, growing the economy from the bottom.
In this regard, I have read that Africa and, in fact, Kenya are at the forefront of using mobile telephones in the area of mobile banking.
Yes.
Could you tell me what impact has that had on these social programs? And
that's very interesting.
Where do you see this trend going?
That's a part of, again, opening up the continent, opening up the economy, liberalizing the economy. Just 10 years ago, only some 300,000 or so Kenyans had access to a telephone. When we liberalized the communication sector and opened it up to the point where we now have some 4 or 5 mobile telephone companies, within a period of 10 years, we've gone from 300,000 Kenyans having access to a telephone to now close to 20 million having access. And the innovations within that subsector are incredible. That is where one of the leading mobile services provider, Safaricom, has actually innovated a money transfer system using the mobile telephone. What that has done, some studies have been done at the Institute for Development Studies at the University of Nairobi, not conclusive at this point yet. But what they are saying is that the ability the facility that the Safaricom provides to Kenyans to transfer money by telephone may very well have contributed more to national development than any other investment that the government has made since independence. Just this ability to be able to transfer money from the people who have the money into the hands of people who would not. You have to realize that most of this rural poor population were people who, of course, didn't have banking. So sending money from point A to point B was such a chore. Money would get lost, all sorts of things will happen. And those are disincentives for people who wanted children who work in towns who need to remit money back to support their parents and their siblings and so forth. But now, with 20 million handsets in the hands of Kenyans, a significant number of these people being young people, middle class, people who now have access to some disposable income, the ability to put money in the hands, taking money out of the urban setting and urban centers into the rural and the peripheries of the country and putting that money in the hands of the poor is changing the economies in the traditionally poor rural setups. And the sky's the limit. The banks have come in later as a result of what this telephone company was able to do, the banks then started asking questions about, oh my God, money is being transferred from point A to point B. They are transferring more money than all the banks put together using a mobile telephone. And so they quickly realized that rather than try to compete and put all sorts of obstacles in the way of these money transfers using telephones, they said, let's join them and see if we can find opportunities for partnerships. So what we are seeing now is some of the large commercial banks are going into partnerships with mobile telephone companies to now start doing all these other innovative things so that people can now bank using their telephones, people can withdraw money using their telephones, and so forth and so on. Again, the sky's the limit when it comes to these innovations. And again, young people, 30 years of age, all of them well-educated, trained, they're the ones who are bringing about all these innovations.
That's a remarkable story, and thank you for sharing that with us. Just one last question. If you had a chance to address, say, a room full of CEOs, international CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, and tell them why they should invest in Africa and why they should invest in Kenya, what are some of the reasons that you would give?
I think the number one reason would be that if you want a place where your investment will, one, bring you good returns and will bring you good returns in a sustainable manner over a long period of time, and you're willing to wait. You do not want to make a quick dollar or a quick euro and jump out and repatriate the profits. If you're in it for the long haul, and if you are in the business with the mindset that you want to make a profit, obviously, as a business, as a foreign investor, but you also want to support the development of the continent, then your time frame must also be long-termish. Yeah? So none of that in and out quickly. You might make your money, but you might not do much for. But if you want to be in it for the long haul and you want to do it in a sustainable manner and you want a loyal partner and a loyal customer base, then the continent is the place to go. Again, because of the riches and the commodities that we have available, this growing middle class that we have, this infrastructure that we are investing in that will make it possible for you, being in one African country, to do business in a whole range of countries. If you come to Nairobi, now talking about Kenya, why Kenya? An investment in Kenya is an investment in the entire continent. Within 4 hours of Nairobi, you can fly to 24 capitals on the continent. That ought to be an incentive for any business person, again, looking at the size of the market. Within the next, it's predicted 5-10 years at the most, we will have a population of 1 billion. And if that isn't market enough, then I don't know what is. So I think all the sort of ingredients are in place for Africa to be the place where an investor, a serious investor, should be.
Ambassador Odembo, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My pleasure. Thank you very much.